so our topic this evening is on a Parshat Shavua, on the Parsha of Pinchas. But it's a general topic, a very important topic, I think, and I called it On Zealousy and the Art of Listening. So there's something very important in the Darchei Limud about how to study Tanakh. And it says in the Yerushalmi that Divrei Torah aniyim b'mkomam ve'ashirim b'makom acher. Meaning that the words of Torah, in one place it might only say a sum of a picture, and in a different place there is going to be more information. So in order to study Torah properly, one has to see the whole picture. And in our case over here, when we only read the end of a Balak and the parasha of a Pinchas, and we read about a Pinchas, so we don't fully understand who Pinchas actually was. And actually, from then until now, not everyone understands the zealousy of Pinchas. And it says, even in the Talmud, it says in the tractate of the Talmud that after Pinchas did what he did, so many people, he condemned him. And even the Sanhedrin wanted to condemn him. And it says that even the angels were angry about him. You could see that in the source of Yefri. There's the different his sources about it. So the question is, if we really understand what Pinchas did and why he did it, and the answer is no. We don't fully understand it if we only look at the story which is mentioned in the end of a Balak and at the beginning of a Pinchas. The only way to understand the Pinchas, it is to examine a different story, a story at the end of a book of Yehoshua, which also talks about Pinchas. And only when we compare both of these stories together can we have a full picture about Pinchas and about what he did and who he was, what his motives were, and only then can we understand him. So, as I said, this is an example of a way to study a Tanakh that you have to really compare the different sources. And this is true not only about studying a Tanakh, but also studying the Talmud. If you really want to understand the Talmud, you can't only study one sugya. You have to compare it to different places in the Talmud where it talks about the same idea. And there's something that really helps us. It is called the Ein Mishpat. That's right. The Ein Mishpat, it is little letters that they send you to. I'm sorry, I meant Masoret Hashash. Masoret Hashash actually sends you to a different tractates, and then only when you see the whole picture could you really understand what it says there. And the same thing is true also about studying the Rambam, Maimonides. if you really want to understand what the Maimonides is saying, you have to compare what he is saying in one book to his responses and to his introductions, and only then could you understand really what the Maimonides is saying. So what I am trying to say, if at this technique, if it's a strategy, is a true about studying any part of the Torah. It says a Pikudei Hashem. It says that only when you will look at the whole picture could you understand the Torah properly, because the words of Torah in different places they form together a wonderful picture and a wonderful message that you could grasp only when you see all of the different sources. Okay? Any questions until now? Okay.
Doesn't Rambam usually kind of put everything that he wants? He was very organized in what he said. Didn't he kind of try and keep things in the same place?
It is true that he's very organized. However, in his responses, many times he adds more information. If you don't have the information, so you can't fully understand what he's saying in the Mishneh Torah. And only when you put everything together, so you could understand it. Okay? So we're going to study here today the end of a book of Yoshua, chapter 22, and then when we understand this, we are going to fully understand who Pinchas was. And if at the end of Balak and of Pinchas, one could look at Pinchas in as a zealous person who is prepared to use force in order to bring the truth. So in the end of the book of Yoshua, there's a completely different story and a completely different approach about Pinchas. Okay, so let's study it together. So you could see in the source 6, it is a very interesting story. I'm not going to read everything because it's very long. It is a whole chapter, and I've got the English translation over here. Sorry that the photocopying is very small and it is a bit harder to read it, but as I said, we aren't going to go through everything now. I am just going to tell you the story, and then we're going to study it together. We're going to ask your questions about it, okay? And then see if we could find the answers. Okay, so the story is that Moshe Rabbeinu made a bargain with the 2.5 tribes, the tribe of Reuven, the tribe of Gad, and also half of the tribe of Manasseh. That's right, because they saw the eastern part of of a land east of the Jordan River, and they loved it. They loved it. It was a wonderful place. So they said, but we want to live over there, where Syria and Jordan is today. Okay? It was probably most of also a parts of the Golan. A beautiful place, a beautiful place. So they said that we have a lot of cattle. We need space. We need this land. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, okay, if you want to have this land, you can have it. And one condition, you have to go to the army. You have to be, right, not only part of the army, you have to be at the front. You have to be those, the chalutzim, the pioneers who are going to be in front of everything. And only after you finish that, only after you help your brothers conquer all the land of Israel, you can go back and stay in the eastern part. Okay? So they agreed, and they did a terrific job. They really did a good job. And it says that Yehoshua called them up. We could see it at the source 6. אז יקרא יהושע לראובני ולגדי ולחצי מטה מנשה, ויאמר להם, אתם שמרתם את כל אשר ציווה אתכם משה עבד השם, ותשמעו בקולי לכל אשר ציוויתי אתכם. You did exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu he told you. You really did a terrific job. So you can go home. Okay? He dismissed them from the army. Okay, and he said, okay, you could go back. And then some drama happens when they go back to the eastern side. That's right. They build their own altar. Now, why did they build their own altar? That's right. They thought it is going to be. Why did they build it? What kind of a zikaron is it?
The Shiloh. Even though they might be outside of the actual main body of the land, they're still being zocher that me'ever ha'yarden, that's where the main ikat is.
That's right, that they themselves are going to remember, and also that their children are, because that they didn't want any situation that they aren't going to be part of the nation of Israel. It says over here, you can look at the bottom of page 2 at Pasuk Tet. וישובו וילכו בני ראובן ובני גד וחצי שבט המנשה מת בני ישראל משילה אשר בארץ כנען הולכת אל ארץ הגלעד אל ארץ אחוזתם אשר נאחזו בה על פי השם וביד משה ויעבור אל גלילות הירדן אשר בארץ כנען ויבנו בני ראובן ובני גד חצי שבט המנשה שם מזבח על הירדן מזבח גדול למראה. Now, it is important to note that we didn't have any intention of using it. It was just like a showpiece. Okay, it was a replica of the mizbeach, but the action was misinterpreted. Right? They actually, he didn't think that it was. The nation of Israel didn't actually like that, right? So what does it say? You could look at a Pasuk Yud Aleph on page 3. וישמעו בני ישראל לאמור, הנה בנו בני ראובן ובני גד בחצי שבט המנשה את המזבח אל מול ארץ כנען גלילות הירדן, וישמעו בני ישראל ויקהלו כל עדת בני ישראל שילה לעלות אליהם לצבא. They decided to fight them. They gathered the army against their own brothers because they thought, they suspected them in rebellion. Okay, why are you distancing yourself not only physically but also spiritually from the nation of Israel. There is the altar in Shiloh. Why are you building another one? It seems like it is some kind of avodah zarah, like what is going on here? So all of the other tribes were very, very angry about this. And it says that there was almost going to be a civil war. There was almost going to be a civil war. So what happened? It says in verse 13, "Vayishlechu bnei Yisrael el bnei Reuven ve'el bnei Gad ve'el chatzi shevet Menashe el Eretz Gilad et Pinchas ben Elazar ha-Kohen." So now we meet again Pinchas, okay? And we're going to see something very, very interesting over here, okay? So there's a whole discussion, but they send him as a part of a delegation. They said, let's first try and understand why they built this altar, instead of just sending the troops and having a civil war. So it says here, I am going to skip to Tet Zayin, okay? כה אמרו כל עדת השם, מה המעל הזה שמעלתם באלוקי ישראל, לשוב היום מאחורי השם בבנותכם לכם מזבח למורדיכם היום בהשם. This is a rebellion against Hashem. Why are you building this altar? המעט לנו את עוון פרעה, and then they brought all kinds of past sins that all of the nation of Israel suffered, because they were also scared that everyone is going to suffer the consequences, as it happened at the time of Achan. That Achan took from the cherem of the Yericho, and the whole nation was punished because of that, because that there is mutual responsibility, right? And then it is very interesting, you could see after, in between Pasuk Kaf, verse Kaf, and verse Kaf Aleph, what do you see in between? Right, there's a pay. Now, what does it mean if there is a pay in the Tanakh? What?
It's the end of a new line. The end of the paragraph.
That's right. It is called a parasha ptucha. It means, but when you write it, you have to leave it opened. And many, many times it is very important to mention this, because we are also talking about how to study a Tanakh. And when there is a pay, it means that there is silence. And you have to fill the silence. You can't just, okay, now we finished a verse Kaf, let's go right to a verse Kaf Aleph. You have to pause, you have to fill the silence. And it is like a very difficult moment, okay? They said the whole speech, and then there's silence. Everyone is listening. Everyone is trying to figure out what is going to happen next. So when there is a pay, there has to be a moment of suspense. And it is very important, because that it says that there are 600,000 letters in the Torah, okay? And are there really 600,000 letters?
Well, I mean, approximately 600,000. It's like 603,000. I don't know, but it's approximately 600,000.
Well, it is actually
Or
almost 50% less. There's only like 300,000.
Well, Tanakh is 600,000, I think.
In the Torah. So there's only a 300,000, about a 300,000 approximately. So why do Chazal say that there's 600,000? Why do they say the 600,000? So the answer is that as you learn from what is written, you also have to learn from what is not written. You also have to add the silences. That's right. That's right. When it says pay, parasha ptucha, it is part of the story. There is a lot of meaning. So also over here, you have to imagine that there is a very difficult silence. And then, eventually, it says in verse Kaf Aleph, ויענו בני ראובן ובני גד וחצי שבט מנשה וידברו את ראשי אלפי ישראל. They start talking and they start explaining why they did what they did. אל אלוקים השם הוא יודע וישראל הוא ידע אם במרד ואם במעל בהשם אל תשנו היום הזה. Hashem knows the truth, that we did not mean to rebel against Hashem. Our intentions are pure. We have pure intentions. We didn't build this altar to distance ourselves. We built this altar for a completely different reason. And what is? We didn't build it over here. לבנות לנו מזבח לשוב מאחורי השם, אם לעלות עליו עולה ומנחה. We didn't intend to use this altar. Why did we do this? So it says in verse 24, why did they do it? ואם לא מדאגה מדבר עשינו את זאת לאמור מחר יאמרו בניכם לבנינו לאמור מה לכם ולהשם אלוקי ישראל? Tomorrow. And when it says a tomorrow, so it doesn't mean in another 24 hours, it means in a few generations. In a few generations, your children are going to say to our children, who are you? You come from the east and we come from the west. We don't believe that you are Jewish. We don't believe that you're part of the nation of Israel. Who said that you are part of us? וגבול נתן השם בינינו וביניכם, and there is a natural barrier. There is the Jordan River in between us. אין לכם חלק בהשם. You don't have any part in Hashem. והשביתו ביניכם את בינינו לבלתי יראו את השם. Yeah.
What I was thinking was I looked at my notes. It's the letter plus the negative space of a letter also counts as a letter, which is how it gets to approximately 600,000. That's what I was thinking.
That's right, right, Natan. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. So it says, ונאמר נעשה נא לנו לבנות את המזבח לא לעולה ולא לזבח כי עדו בינינו וביניכם. It is a monument. A physical witness to remind your children and our children and the generations after us that we are one people. We are one nation. We belong. And in verse כ"ח, ונאמר ויקי יאמרו אלינו ולדורתנו מחר ואמרו ראו את תבנית מזבח השם עשו אבותינו לא לעולה ולא לזבח כי אלו בינינו וביניכם חלילה לנו ממנו למרוד בהשם לשוב היום. We do not intend to rebel at all. We are only going to sacrifice in the right place, in the Shiloh, and then in the future in the temple. And then, what is between a Kaftet and Lamed? Another pay. There is deep silence. The words of the 2.5 tribes, Aleph, And then it says something amazing. What does it say on the Pasuk Lamed?
Yishma Pinchas.
Vayishma Pinchas. Now, this, in my opinion, is one of the most important psukim in the Tanakh. It says Vayishma Pinchas. Pinchas listened. Now, why is it so important? Because it's the same Pinchas who used violence, used force, in zealousy, in order to do what he had to do for the sake of the truth, for the sake of what he believed in. And it's the same Pinchas here, who instead of using violence, instead of using force, instead of using zealousy, which we would have expected him to use, he listened. And he really listened because that he used the art of listening. He really listened to their pure intentions. And then what does it say? In verse Lamed Aleph, Vayomer Pinchas ben Elazar HaKohen el bnei Ruven vel bnei Gad vel bnei Menashe. Hayom yadanu ki betochenu Hashem, asher lo amaltem b'Hashem amar hazeh. Az hitzaltem et bnei Yisrael miyad Hashem. I believe you. I really understood that you have pure intentions, and I believe you. So Pinchas over here saved the nation of Israel from civil war. If it would have been a civil war, it would have been the end. Because that these 2.5 tribes, they were the head of the army. They were the pioneers. They were the best troops. And if it would have been war, chas v'chalila, it could have been the end of the Jewish people. This is why it's so dramatic. This is why it is so important.
Yet, when it came to Benjamin, they went to war and almost killed the whole entire tribe of Benjamin.
That's right. That was a terrible story. A terrible story, and it just shows us what can happen when there is a civil war. And imagine what could have happened if it was 2.5 tribes that they were fighting against. And so there was one person who saved the Jewish people for centuries, and that was Pinchas. Because that he was able to listen. He put the zealousy aside, and he held the art of listening.
Wow.
And this is what he did. And then I would like to show you something very interesting from the Talmud of the Zevachim, okay? And it says in the Talmud of the Zevachim, there is a debate when Pinchas when he received the blessing of the priesthood, okay? So it says over here in Zevachim, okay, so there is a debate between Rabbi Elazar and Rav Ashi. So according to Rabbi Elazar, he received the blessing of a priesthood. He became a priest after he used force and he killed Zimri. Okay? However, and it says, והייתה לו ולזרעו אחריו ברית כהונת עולם. Okay? And it shall be unto him and to his seed after him the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. Okay? But according to the view of Rav Ashi, and you could see it in the source 10, so it says something very, very important. It says, Ad shesham shalom ben ashvatim, shenemar, vayishma Pinchas HaKohen, unisiyei ha'idam v'rashei alfei Yisrael. he only received the priesthood only after he made peace among the tribes. And this was so important because that he was able to prevent civil war. And only because of that, he actually received the gift of becoming the priest. As it says, Vayishma Pinchas, because but he was able to listen. So, that's right. נכון?
Understood in the beginning what it means.
That's right. Because this is an act of force. How could it be connected to peace? So that is why I said that the only way to study Tanakh is to look at the whole picture. The only way to understand the story of Pinchas, which is a very strange story. It is a very strange story that even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what to do at that time. And it says that the Sanhedrin condemned him. But only when we combine both of the stories together so we could understand. Because that Pinchas actually taught us that his way was not only the way of zealousy and force. He taught us that his way was really the way of listening and peace. And even Pinchas, that it is that you said about him, Kanai ben Kanayu, okay, he knew how to listen. It says, Vayishma Pinchas. And that is why he was able to bring peace among the tribes. So he actually taught us the gentle power of listening and peace is much stronger than the power of force and zealousy.
Wow.
So that is the shiur today. It's a shorter shiur, but
open it. I never thought of this. It's a whole different look at the. Vayishma.